Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'm going to be talking about Xinjiang. And many of you have heard of Xinjiang, and it's been on the news very recently, over the past couple of years. And things have been escalating on the media on the Western side. For example, there's been talk about genocide of the Uyghur population there. There's been talk of concentration camps, slave labor, and other human rights abuses by China in the Xinjiang province. And if you're American, you probably believe them. After all, the news never lies, right? Things like Fox News and other American news channels, paint China to be this complete caveman civilization, and they're literally banging up millions and millions of Uyghur Muslims that live in Xinjiang into concentration camps, and they're calling it genocide. For example, how the Jews were being persecuted by the Nazis and being killed at concentration camps. They're basically calling it genocide, and those have been in these concentration camps with the Nazis will know you can't really compare something like that to what's happening in Xinjiang now. So I want to kind of start off about talk about Xinjiang, where it is, and why the Western media is painting such a bad picture of Xinjiang, especially to China, and the reasons behind it. So where is Xinjiang? As you can see from this map, it's on the northwestern side of China. And you might look at it and think, oh, hang on a second, this area is very much, it doesn't have any water, it's landlocked, it's full of deserts, so why is it so important? Well, I'll tell you why. So this is the reason, the BRI. So China has been doing this huge, massive world infrastructure program called the BRI, and what that means is China is building roads and infrastructure projects around the world, which will provide land route access to China, to and from Chinese goods across different continents. So the blue bits you see is rail routes that are going to Europe. There's also plan for an Arctic sea route, but there's also a southern sea route as well. And there is also another, and this is a more accurate one, there is also another Pakistani corridor which receives goods to and from Gwadar. So as you can see, everything goes through Xinjiang, and looking at this map you can see all the lines which are going via Xinjiang. So that's why it's so important, Xinjiang to China, because the whole economic BRI project goes through Xinjiang. Not only there's railroads being built, there's also roads, there's also power plants, there's also ports, dry ports, cities, and they're literally, it's costing them trillions and trillions and trillions of pounds or dollars to get this right. And these links go all the way to Europe, goes through Africa, goes to Middle East. So it goes all over the world really. And you can see from this map, literally every part of the world is covered, except America. But there is a BRI project in South America as well. But I digress. So this is the number one reason Xinjiang is important, but there are 5 main important reasons which I'm going to discuss. So this is number one. The second most important reason Xinjiang is important to China, as you can see here, there's gas pipelines going via Xinjiang, and the most important pipeline is coming from Russia. It's called the Altai gas pipeline, and it's coming from Russia, and it goes via Xinjiang, and it services all of China. There's other pipelines being built by Russia as well, but the one in Xinjiang is the biggest one at the moment. There's also, as you can see, this is a better map. There's also these couple of other gas pipelines coming from Turkmenistan, and there is also a huge gas reserves which is found in Xinjiang as well. And you can see by all of these lines, basically all of these gas pipelines are servicing all major cities in China. So without these gas pipelines, China would be at serious risk. So it's hugely important to have these pipelines. There is another pipeline being built by Russia, which is going to be servicing the northeast, but that's going to take a bit of time to build. But these are the main pipelines coming from Russia, from Turkmenistan, and there's also their internal gas field which they found in Xinjiang. And why is gas so important? Well, first of all, it's a cleaner form of energy compared to coal, and China needs to go away from coal, which is quite a dirty fossil fuel. So gas is the future, really, and it's a much cleaner fossil fuel than coal. So the next reason is oil, and this is the number third reason why Xinjiang is hugely important to China. China finds a major oil reserves in Xinjiang, and it's literally billions of tons they found. As you can see, Discovery has potential to have another 1 billion tons of reserves, and this is all in Xinjiang as well. And with all of these gas and oil reserves, and from this map you can see even the shale oil and gas as well. And you can see all of Xinjiang is literally covered with oil and gas, and even shale oil as well. This region itself has already been China has been gathering the oil from this region for kind of a number of years, but there is still a lot of oil. But I mean, if you look at Xinjiang itself, there is huge amounts there to be found, and literally the whole of Xinjiang is covered with oil and gas, which is amazing, really. And from another map here, and you can see how much oil and gas is still around Xinjiang area, and it's a huge amount, and that in itself would provide China's energy and oil needs for the next 50 years or so, until they move away from oil. And within 10 to 20 years, China could be in a position where it could be a net exporter of oil, the same way America has been doing with its shale oil as well. What American does is they use a process called fracking, and this process basically fracks the oil from the ground, and it's a new process where you get more oil from the ground as compared to the previous ways of digging oil. So and they do it using it's called shale oil. So I don't know the technical parts of it, but I'm gonna probably release another video about it soon. But you can see amount of oils that's still in Xinjiang area, and there is a huge amount. So that's the third main reason. The fourth main reason, I'm going to come back to this diagram in a bit, but I want to go back to way back. A lot of people don't know about the third Taiwan crisis, so I want to go through why BRI has taken place. Why has China invested so much money in the BRI? Well, this is the reason why, really, and not many people know about this. It's called the third Taiwan Crisis, and it came at a time when it started with the Clinton administration, by the way. So the crisis began in 1995. Taiwan's first ever democratic elections for president was set for 1996, a major event that Beijing naturally opposed. The sitting president Lee Teng-hui of the Kuomintang party was invited to the United States to speak about his alma mater, Cornell University. Lee was already disliked by Beijing for his emphasis on Taiwanization, which favoured home rule and established separate Taiwan identity away from mainland China. Now he has been asked to speak on Cornell on Taiwan's democratic, and Beijing was furious. So what this caused, I mean, Beijing was hugely unhappy about this, and they and Taiwan and Beijing nearly came to blows, and what happened was they couldn't, because American forces were already operating in the area. The USS Bunker Hill Aegis cruiser was stationed off southern Taiwan to monitor the Chinese missile tests, and the Japan-based USS Independence, along with destroyers Hewitt and O'Brien and frigate McCluskey, took up position on the eastern side of the island. So there was a lot of missile tests going on by China, and they were kind of saying to Taiwan, "Look, guys, do not do this. Do not anger us. Do not piss us off. This could turn into war." But however, because there was a huge amount of American naval warships there, they surrounded the Taiwan island, and they forced China to kind of step back. And back then in 1995, 1996, they couldn't really do anything, because they didn't really have much of a naval fleet, much of a army in terms of modern army with modern equipment, fighter jets, battle cruisers, submarines. I mean, 20-30 years ago, China really did not have much in terms of military, because there was a huge they couldn't even buy military because there was a huge embargo going on because of the Tiananmen Square massacre. So there was a huge embargo where the whole world was not allowed to sell to China. So China didn't even have much money back then, and they didn't have much of a military, so they couldn't really do much. So they had to step back, and they were quite embarrassed that they couldn't do anything at the time, and it's part of China's century of humiliation, really. And you can see from here, the third Taiwan Crisis was a brutal lesson for China that had long prepared to fight wars inside its own borders. Still, PLA Navy deserve credit for learning from the incident, and now 20 years later it's quite possible that China could seriously damage or even sink an American carrier. So they've learned a lot of lessons from those days, and the reason they had to learn lessons was because of this crisis. America had released a white paper discussing ways to punish China if it ever did decide to attack Taiwan. So this white paper basically discussed how they can blockade China, and this diagram is basically explains it. So if China ever invaded Taiwan or attacked Taiwan, America had a plan to blockade China, and this was the blockade. They would use the Quad countries like Japan, Australia, India, and they would basically surround China and have a huge blockade, and they would blockade any oil, and they would blockade goods, trade, and back then China was hugely dependent on oil, on trade, and if there was a blockade that could happen, China would be in serious trouble. And this blockade was released in I think a lot of American papers, and there was also all of these articles coming out at the time, how a massive naval blockade could destroy China. And you can see from all of these articles how they can blockade China. So I want to go back to this kind of diagram as well, and show you how China could be blockaded. So as you can see, Japan, South Korea, there's a lot of US troops there. You have Guam here. So literally America would basically cover the eastern side of this East China Sea and South China Sea as well. India would blockade this area. It's called Malacca Strait or something. I can't remember the exact names, but there's a group of islands around here which where vessels need to go through into the South China Sea, and India owns these islands, and India could blockade any ships going to and from this area, and if they try to go around around that blockade, then Australia would come in, and Australia would get help with American obviously ships and blockade this side of things. So as you can see, China would be completely blocked, and there would have been a huge blockade. And at the time, China was a huge importer of oil, and trade was their main economy, and they would have been in huge trouble. So this is why Xi Jinping wanted the BRI project. So they did not want to be basically dependent on ships going through sea. So the BRI project meant that if America tried to blockade them on the sea, they have ground routes which come up. So these ground routes basically, they go to Europe for trade, so they don't need to go through the sea, and it goes direct to Europe by land and train. The links to Russia and Iran are basically for oil. So Russia is also a huge producer of oil, and so is Iran. So in terms of oil, if there was ever a blockade, they can still carry on getting oil from Iran and Russia. And this is the main reason that the BRI was invented, and it's a huge intelligent work of art, really. I mean, it's such genius, and the amount of money, yeah, it is costing them a lot of money. It is costing them trillions, but America is spending trillions fighting these proxy wars in Iraq and Syria, Afghanistan. They're spending trillions, and at least China is spending that money to do good. So that's the other main reason. The fourth reason why Xinjiang is important is because of this. So in case China was ever blockaded, Xinjiang is the main port or main area which can still kind of go into all of these areas. And also, number four, the main reason Xinjiang is important is if ever China needed to help its allies, all its main allies are in this part of the world. So you can see, for example, Iran. If Iran ever needed any help, if Pakistan ever needed any help, all of their links go via Xinjiang. So they can help them in if there's any humanitarian issues, or they needed some help in wars, for example. China would be able to provide assistance. And this side with Russia is a huge country, and if Russia ever had issue with Ukraine and there was a war, or there was issues with Crimea, and Russia asked China for help, and in return they would, if they ever sign a military alliance, and Russia and China could agree an alliance, for example, China could help Russia with Crimea and Ukraine, and Russia would help China if it ever came to Taiwan. So there could be some sort of military alliance there. And in order to help Russia, China needs Xinjiang. I mean, going via this route is a much longer route, and if Russia needs help quickly, this is the best and easiest way to go. So that's the fourth main reason. And the fifth main reason, which not many people are actually talking about, a lot of YouTube channels actually missed this point. And number five, the reason Xinjiang is important to China and the area is because the West is throwing a lot of lies about Xinjiang, saying how people are being, there's 3 million people in concentration camps, people going missing, there's a population control, and women getting forced abortions, and there's forced labor, lots of wild accusations, and the reason they're giving out these accusations is because China had a terrorist problem not long ago, and hundreds of Chinese people have died at the hands of Uyghur terrorists, really. And people, there's cars driving over people in Beijing, and people in railway stations stabbing others, and there's a lot of horror stories, and these people are coming from Uyghurs, from Xinjiang. So what China did, they did this re-education program where they're basically putting these people up in training centers and re-education centers, because what they see is, this is a better way of dealing with terrorists and dealing with terrorism as a whole. And what the West is doing, if you look at Syria, Iraq, if you look at Afghanistan, what the West are doing with terrorists, they're torturing them, they're locking them up in places like Abu Ghraib, they're torturing them, they're blowing terrorists up with no trial or anything. I mean, like with drones, they're literally blowing people up left, right and centre all over Iraq, Afghanistan. There's no trial, there's no re-education, they're just literally blowing people up. And they're torturing people, and when they look at China and what they're doing with re-education, they're basically, and the terrorism has stopped, over the past 10-20 years. There hasn't really been much, the terrorism has gone down, and over the last 10 years there hasn't been any terrorism attacks. So whatever that China is doing is working, and the population in Xinjiang is actually growing, so there's no mass incarceration, or the West likes to put it. So the West is scared that the China's model of re-education and getting rid of terrorism is working, and they're looking at that and they're thinking, oh shit, it's actually a better system than ours, than blowing people up and with drones and with airstrikes and with torture, and it's actually a better system than what the Americans are doing. Americans are the real anti-humanitarian people out there, and they don't really give a shit about people in Xinjiang, the Uyghur Muslims, and most Americans don't even know who they are, and Americans don't even like Muslims. I mean, if you look at America, Muslims are really looked down upon, and women are not allowed to wear burqas, and Muslims get attacked, and they don't give a shit about Muslims, Americans or America in itself. So those are the 5 main points why Xinjiang is important to China, really, and why at all costs Xinjiang must remain with China, and why China will never let Xinjiang go, or why China will never let it destabilize, no matter how much the West tries with lies and fabrications. So as a summary, the 5 main points Xinjiang is important to China. Number 1, BRI. Number 2, the gas. Number 3, the oil. Number 4, to help all the allies. Number 5 is how they're dealing with terrorism, and the model they're putting around the world. The West does not want a communist country system to be better than the Western democracy model. So they see that, and they're just panicking, really. And you can see China's main alliance with Russia, Iran, they want to cut these guys. They want to drive a wedge between Russia and Iran, and Xinjiang is right in the middle and heart of everything that's going good with China at the moment. So that's all for today, really. So give me a shout and subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to like and share, and also if you can, go into my Patreon, and if you can kind of share this channel with your friends. And I like to get this message out there. I don't want to monetize the channel. I want to kind of get the message out. So if you can help, it'll be good. Thanks, guys.